Welcome to Screen Time Battles, How to Avoid Them. I am going to talk tonight about those battles we have in our homes with your kids. The intention of this presentation is for parents who have from preschoolers to middle school. I know some of you have high school students, and I'll talk about that as we go through. But the main intention is to help parents who are not yet in the full blown battles that high school students might be in with their parents. So go ahead. The first part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about those battles that we have and how they start. So just a little bit of the presentation is going to be about sort of the background about what kind of things might be happening at different ages and stages for those of you who aren't at all the different stages. And that won't be the main part of the presentation. And then I'm going to get into a program of what it is that you can do at different ages and stages. Okay. So first thing, toddlers. If you have a toddler, I want to talk about the impact of screens on those toddlers. Brain development is impacted by every time we give our kid a screen, every time they are dealing with a digital device, they're lacking tactile stimulation. The stimulation that they get from playing with Duplos or turning pages of real books and being able to feel things and experience things on a two-dimensional screen are just not the same. And it impacts their ability to process. And it's very subtle and we don't really think about it, which is why it's so easy to use electronics as an electronic babysitter, right? We just hand our kid the iPhone at dinner or something like that, or we're wanting them to get distracted so that we can finish a conversation. But the other thing at the age of toddler is, let's say you're going to the park and you are pushing your toddler on the swings. There's many times that I go to a park and I see a parent pushing the toddler on the swings and they're sitting there on their phone. They're reading their messages or talking on the phone or whatever. And as a parent, I'm distracted when I'm doing that. And so that the toddler kind of gets a little bit robbed of having interaction with their parents because their parents are so fixed on the actual phone instead of them. So what about in elementary school? Well, a lot of you are in elementary school right now, and you know that battles for time starts. Like, I want more time. I want more TV time. I want more screen time. I want. And it is so easy for screens to be a cure for boredom. I'm bored. I'm bored. I want, Mom, I'm so bored. And so oftentimes we give into that. I know that when I was talking to a few of you parents before the talk started, absolutely, you are in that throes of like, hey, a lot of toys around here, go use them. But it is a cure for boredom, and it's really sad because we give into it because we're tired of hearing them say that I'm bored. In elementary school, it's when, gaming and texting type stuff starts, whether it be with Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever. There's all sorts of games that younger kids get involved in, and some of them are really fun. But it also starts leading on a path that we need to be aware of what could be, complicating. There's also, because our kids are getting exposed to things electronically, there's some pressure to grow up faster than maybe they should. And the other thing that happens is with these two-dimensional devices, if they're having a conversation with someone via text or whatever medium, oftentimes they are not able to process the empathy. Like other times, if you saw someone to your face and you said, "Oh, you're so stupid," it sounds different if I'm saying it to someone's face as opposed to me typing it on my tablet or whatever, and saying you're so stupid. And we don't know, like sometimes our friend just thinks we're joking around, but other times our friend is crushed and they wind up being hurt in ways that we can't even tell because these screens don't have the ability to provide that empathy into their lives. Now, when kids start getting into middle school, what's the impact there? Well, for some of you who have middle school girls, texting and social media is huge. They want Snapchat, they want TikTok, they want no, most of them don't want Facebook anymore, but they want to interact and it's part of them. For boys, it tends to be that gaming is really big. Social media is big too, but gaming, I think more so. And this is the time where the kids get into a situation where the internet might never forget. They might do things that are so outrageous that it's not going to be good. And some of those things are getting exposed to things like sexting and porn and bullies and predators, things that can really impact their lives in a long-term sense. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to protect our kids from that. This is the stage where it can have a massive impact on their lives. Now, when they get to high school, for those of you who have high school students or eventually will, if you have good habits with your kids that are established when they're younger, um, if you're going to be pretty fine. But if you don't have good habits, if they haven't been formed when they were earlier, then you're going to have huge problems. I know some of you, we were talking earlier, it's hard to change a high schooler's behavior if they already have their phone 24/7 and a laptop 24/7. It's hard to undo that. But it's possible also for some people to have controlled their electronics for their high schoolers so much that it can be just as bad as having no control at all, where they have 24/7 access. It can be just as bad for us to have locked down things so much so that they don't have TikTok, they don't have Snapchat, they don't have any of these apps to sort of like test the waters. So I'm going to talk about that balance. How do we reach that balance? They do need to experiment. They need to experiment in high school. And the older they get and the closer to graduation from high school they get, they need to have more and more freedoms so that you can work with them if things go awry. So, what do you do if you're an elementary school parent? How do you up the chance that by middle and high school that you're in that category of having set up good habits with your kids? Well, I'm going to talk in two phases tonight. The first phase, there's 13 guidelines for success that I'm going to go over. The first phase is all about pre-cell phone use. For this phase one, pre-cell phone use revolves around things that the family owns, devices that the family or the school owns, that they aren't really individually owned by the child. So what's the first thing? First thing I recommend is electronics out of the bedrooms. I mean, all private areas, bathrooms, offices, wherever. Electronics should not be in bedrooms. And that includes not only laptops and TVs and ebooks, but also Alexa and Siri devices. I really don't think that's a good place for them. I have this other caveat, however, because we're all hopefully coming out of COVID, although some of you still have kids that are at home in homes, online learning. The revision for when we're in this COVID online learning from home, after schoolwork is done, is the time to make sure that all electronic devices come out of the room or are unplugged. Of course, I was just talking to a dad before this, and a lot of the electronic devices are run on batteries. So it being in the room, if it's battery operated, that means that the device can continue to operate after you've supposedly turned it off. I would take all devices out of the bedroom, especially if your kids are in, kindergarten through fifth grade. I would have them be out of the bedroom. I would have them be out as much as you can. It's just a really good habit to get in. So because as I put on the slide, they do have a way of staying in the room once they're there. So you want to set up a good habit for your kids that when they're young, that all electronics come out of the room. If it's not COVID, we don't want them in the room anyway. But during COVID, they come out of the room when schoolwork's done. The next thing is that the electronics are in public places, which is kind of just the opposite of what I just said. Put them in the family room, the kitchen, the dining room. When my kids were in high school, I dedicated the dining room in my house to their electronics, to doing their homework, actually. I think that doing homework in their bedrooms is not advantageous either. I mean, some of you might live in a house where it's too noisy for your child to do homework in a public place, but I want you to think about, is it possible for them to do it in a public place? But for sure, their electronics should be done in a public place if you can at all possible, if you can make that happen. If you can, while they're in elementary school, just set a family rule like, oh, in our house, we do electronics in public places, then you're going to have less challenges when they get to middle school and high school in keeping them out, in keeping your kids safe. That doesn't mean that it's going to be safe for sure, even if they're in public places, but it just makes the opportunities a little bit less. Oops, sorry. Makes the opportunities a little bit less. What's the third one? I want you to set time limits for your kids. And you need to decide what the limitations are and stick to them. The American Association of Pediatrics, they say it doesn't matter what limits you set. What matters is that you stick to them. They could be daily limits, like we do it 30 minutes a day or 2 hours a day, or we only do it 3 hours on the weekends, or Saturdays they get 2 hours, and every day they get 30 minutes. Lots of families have all sorts of different methods that they use to allocate the time. And I want you to know that the important part is that you have a regular schedule and that you keep to it. Every time your kid says, I'm bored, and you give in because you're tired of hearing them whine, every time that happens, you wind up telling them that there are no limits. If you all of a sudden say, okay, fine, have 2 more hours, or okay, fine, whatever. Oh, you're done with your homework, just go ahead and play for as long as you want. The kid thinks there's no limits, and that's part of their job, is to test limits in life. And if they test you on a regular basis and there aren't no limits, you like some days it's a half an hour, some days it's 3 hours, some days it's 1 hour. If they never know how many hours or minutes there are per day, they're going to ask you every single day instead of you just being able to say, oh, well, what's our family rule for a weekday? And you just kind of miming it back to them. Um, the I do a couple of other lectures, and one of the lectures that's on YouTube as well is called "Getting Your Kids to Listen," and it has a lot of good hints for what you can do about kids who are whining or not obeying or whatever, and how to deal with consequences and things like that. So I'll get into that later, though. So next thing is that not only do you define what the limits are, but you have your kids help participate in defining the consequences. You need to set up in your house that electronics is a privilege. It is not a right. I know the kids now, they're going to say, but mom, I have to do my schoolwork and everything. It's like, well, that's fine. But depending on where and when they're doing their schoolwork, they can have, it's a privilege to be able to use those devices. And you want to set that attitude up in your house. And you, as part of the process, when you involve your children in decisions in their life, you get much more compliance than if you just set down the law of like, well, if you go over by half an hour of your electronic limits today, then you can't have any for a week, or you can't have any tomorrow, or whatever. Instead, I would encourage you to turn the tables of like, let's set up what our family rule is per day. Like, have a family meeting. I love the concept of family meetings. I have podcasts on it and stuff like that, and I talk about it regularly. But you have a little family meeting to say, I just learned that we really need to set some limits and have some really good guidelines. What do you guys think the guidelines should be each day? Should we have a different amount of time for playing on electronics and TV on the weekdays versus the weekends? Have a discussion with them. They'll feel part of the process. And as you do that, say, okay, well, let's say we have an hour every day and 2 hours on the weekend days. Let's just say that's an example. If that's your family's example, you would also continue to talk to them. It's like, okay, that sounds reasonable to me. It was 30 minutes a day during the week, but I think I'm okay with an hour a day. You guys have been so responsible. But you guys, what will happen if you go over an hour? What's the consequence for you going over an hour? And the kids, you want the kids to come up with like, what is the quote unquote punishment? But I like to call it consequences because they're getting to choose to go over their limit. And when they choose it, and they know what the consequence is, it's like, oh, so if you go over the limit by 5 minutes, it means that you lose it for one day. If you go over it by an hour, you lose it for 2 days. You work with them, define what the consequences are. Some kids also have an agreement with their parents of like, if they go over their allotment for the day, then they get extra chores. They might have to do extra helping their little brother or sister get ready for bed or something like that. So have them participate. That's what's going to help your family be able to get through this electronics battles, is to include them. So it's not a battle where you're against each other, but you're on the same side. What a concept, huh? Because we feel so like we're battling all the time. But enforcement's the key. Is that if you do set up family rules for the electronics for screen time, you need to enforce it. You need to have reasonable ones that your kids are willing to agree to. And at least, even if they don't agree to it, they know what the rules are, and that they know what the consequences are. Then you need to follow through. Because every time you don't follow through, it means there is no rule. And then you get into the battle part. And this is the whole talk is about how do you avoid the battle? set up some guidelines, include your kids in the decision making. The next
Great.
thing I
There,
want to, yeah,
there is a question. Do you have a second for a question, or
sure.
should we give it?
No, that's okay. What is it?
Okay. From Vivian, she says the excuse is I need it for homework. How would you address limit in response to homework?
I would work, it's for an older child, who's in middle or high school. I think Vivian said that her children were. And I would talk to the kids about how much time that they need for their electronics to do their homework in a day and give them that time and then have that be the end of it. And they say, but mom, I didn't finish. It's like, oh, that's so sad. What a bummer. And then you could talk to them about maybe extending it and what it would take to extend it, and have discussions each day with them about like, I noticed yesterday that it took an hour and a half instead of an hour for that homework, or 2 hours for that homework, or whatever. When you get into middle school and high school, the kids are using their devices. I mean, and elementary school now with COVID, but you need to be able to have discussions with them to say like how long's reasonable, how do we control that? Where can you do it? If you can have them be using their electronics in public places, maybe you'll let them be on it longer. Um, that kind of thing. But it has to be have discussions with them is what you need to do, and that's going to be what helps prevent battles. But it's going to be a regular discussion that you're going to keep having. Like, I noticed that you're struggling getting all your homework in time on time, and it's like I kind of saw that you have YouTube going on in the background, you have Snapchat that you use on your phone. It's like maybe if you want more time on your laptop, maybe your phone will be across the room charging or something like that. Sort of brainstorm with them how it can happen differently. And if you're in high school and middle school, it might be really hard to change those things. So, my heart goes out to you, and feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to continue brainstorming with you. Okay. Okay. So on to number 5. I want you to use parental control software. It works well for kids that are up to age 9, I'm going to say. And it can really help you enforce limits if you in your household have a limit of 30 minutes a day for little kids, or an hour or something like that. Um, I I think one of the worst jobs in the world is to be the internet cop. Like physically that you're sitting there saying, "Oh, you only have an hour, you're supposed to be off, you're supposed to be off." It's like, I don't want to be in that job. Who It is like the most unfun job in the world, because the kid is going to battle you every day, every minute of every day. So these parental control software things will help get that out of your life and allow the kid to be the owner of, like, oh, that's so sad, an hour, and then your computer shuts off. It also, the control software can also block accidental browsing to websites and stuff that you don't want them to go to. But I want to talk about, there's lots of parental control software out there, and it's very confusing. And I want to give you some hints about what to use. I don't recommend specific products, really. I have a list here on the screen that you can read, but this is not by any means a limited list. But I want you to know that Microsoft, Apple, and Google in the last couple of years have added a lot of parental controls to their software bases in the operating systems themselves that I think are pretty good for some things. And there's other things like Disney Circle that allows you to cover multiple devices. I was reading today, wanted to get a little update because I haven't given this presentation in a year. I really liked this thing at the bottom of the screen. It says, check out Tom's Guide reviews. And Amy's going to put in the chat box a link to that, I think is what I have, Amy. And just they talk about the pros and cons of all sorts of different parental control software. And I want you to read up on it, find out what it is that your family needs. And that's what I want you to do. Review what it does, what the different kinds of software do. They're different prices, they're from different companies. You need to know what kind of things you're trying to control with the parental control software. Like some people might have all Apple devices. We live in Silicon Valley. Most of you live in Silicon Valley, and Apple devices are pretty prevalent here. But in other parts of the country, Android devices are more popular in terms of phones. But there's also, Chromebooks in schools that your kids are using. Windows operating systems are still very popular with laptops and such. And you want to know, do you have a mixed environment? Do you have all Apple products? Is going to lead you down a path that might be different than if one of your kids has a Chromebook and another one has an Apple laptop and stuff like that. So there's going to be different kinds of access and different kinds of control software that you need to look at depending on what you're controlling. You also need to know, are you trying to control Wi-Fi access only or also cell phone network access? Because once you give a kid a cell phone that has a data plan, that data plan can get to the internet anytime. So you need to, as a parent, know that you need to control data access via cell phone as well as Wi-Fi. Because when my kids were going to high school, I was going like, the schools are always saying like, oh, we have good filters and we have blockers for porn and all that kind of stuff at the school on the school Wi-Fi. It's like, well, that's only good as the school Wi-Fi because every kid who walks on the school campus has a cell phone that has a data plan that can get to just about anything they want. And we are giving our kids at younger and younger ages cell phones to go to school. A fourth grader, it is not uncommon. Some of you, I'm sure, on this seminar have fourth graders or even third graders who have a phone, and those phones have data plans, and those cellular data plans are to be protected from your kids, and you want to be making sure that you're covering that. Um, there are some of these plans that go across devices. Like if you give your kid 1 hour a day of electronics and they have an iPad over here and they have a Chromebook here and they have different access to, and then there's the television, you can get, Disney Circle does it where they have an account that's on all those things. And you could use, so you would be looking for a different type of parental control software in that situation than you would if you were trying to control something else. They can control time limits, web filtering. You want to make sure they have app usage reporting. Some parents really want to know if their kids are using different apps, whether they're on Snapchat or TikTok or something like that. Or lots of parents don't let little kids, like elementary school kids, get to those apps. But you can see if they're on their math application, on a Chromebook. The school gives them an app for doing certain things, or if you can see if they're on YouTube, because lots of schools are giving kids access to YouTube, and you can see how long the kid is on YouTube. And it's like, you're on YouTube for 4 hours today and your teacher only needed it for one. So why is there 4 hours of, that kind of stuff? So it can give you some good information for discussions, we'll call them. You can also, using parental control software, limit App Store downloads so that they can't just start downloading games and stuff like that. You can set maturity ratings for different websites and apps with some of them. But this is the one thing that I think is really super helpful to parents. It is free and is called Bark-O-Matic. There is a company called Bark who I do like their software but it is, you have to have a relationship with your child who is willing to have their Bark software on their phone and on their devices to be able to work with your child. It's not a given that that your child will let you do that. But Bark-O-Matic, one of the things that happens to us is that we have Netflix and we have laptops and we have Chromebooks and we have other streaming services, let's say Hulu or Amazon Prime or whatever. There's all these different apps and devices, like setting up how do you set up control on your laptop for parental controls on a Mac laptop? How do you do that? Bark-O-Matic will tell you. It takes you through um, this list of questions. It's a question and answer. They'll ask you about what kind of network do you have? What kind of Wi-Fi do you have? What kind of cell phone service do you have? What kind of computers do you have? What kind of streaming services do you have? And it will spit out to you a PDF with step-by-step instructions for how to set parental controls for each one of those. I don't know. I'm hoping some of you already know that Netflix has parental controls that's separate. YouTube has some parental controls. Some of the parental controls are pretty bad, but it's nice to know that some of them exist. How do you set up parental controls for Snapchat or TikTok or whatever? You want to know that, and Barkomatic can help give you the directions on how to do it. You can always Google on a per app basis, a per computer basis as well. But I just like this is all one place. You do have to give them your email address in order to get the PDF, but you can go off their lists right away. They're a professional company. I trust them. I think they have a really good Facebook group called technology in the something about parents and technology, and really good place to ask questions about what do I do about this or that kind of thing. So I want you to do that. The last thing about this step number 5 is that the parental control software is not foolproof for tech savvy kids. And that means typically it works up until middle school, but after middle school, there's always some kid on campus who has older brothers and sisters who train everybody else how to circumvent any parental control software there is. And they will do that. And you need to know as a parent that parental control software only goes so far. The kids will figure out how to get around whatever barriers you put up. And some of your kids might not, but I want you to all approach this saying that my kid is gonna do it. And just know that. And I want you to just be prepared for it so that when it happens to you, you're not shocked. But I also want to, for those of you who don't have kids with phones yet, I do want to tell you that Android devices allow for more tracking than Apple devices. If I were to give my child a cell phone today, I would give them an Android device. And that is said from somebody who I'm only using Apple devices. I like Apple devices and hardware and the ease of use and everything, but and the company believes heavily in privacy, but I think that our kids aren't ready for all that privacy. So that's my opinion. It's kind of the opinion out in the world. Bark software can track more things because of Android's openness, but it's going to be up to you. But I just want to put in a plug for why I would say that. Next thing, number 6, allocate family time. Those of you who have kids who are coming and saying, I'm bored, I want you to make sure that you're allocating time in your family's life to have family time, whether it's an electronic free drive, get in the car. We don't do electronics in our car. We have a family rule. Like we sing songs, we play the license plate game, we chat. And they're going to say, I'm bored or whatever. It's like, oh, we're just going to look at flowers on the sides of the roads or whatever. It takes effort for sure. Electronic free meals, I think, are really, really important, meaning mom and dad putting aside their cell phones, laptops, whatever, as well, and having some quality time. And that quality time, how long does your dinner last if you're all together? 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And it's like, well, but dad's job is so important. He has to be on call all the time. Or mom's job's so important. They have to be on call all the time. Like 15 or 20 minutes, I find that hard to believe that somebody can't put aside their phone for that long. And it's possible that you might be in that situation, but I want you to somehow make that phone be separate enough so that your kids know that they're important. I also want you to do things where you plan games and hikes and have family movie nights. I want you to do things together. In our electronic, very busy Silicon Valley world, we tend to just let our lives be carried away by the busyness, by signing up our kids for all sorts of camps and after school activities and everything. And we forget to have dinner together. We forget to just be happy on a hike. Our kids are going to moan and complain about going on a hike. It's like, oh, that's okay. We're going to go on a hike anyway. They could pick the place to hike. Include them in it instead of just making, it's like I pick it this week, you pick it next week, or maybe they pick it first. And what games do you want to play? What puzzle do you want to make? Include them in the decisions and get the family time going. You really need that. Family time is worth the investment in the long term, especially as you get into middle and high school. It allows you to have bonding in ways that nothing can take away that bonding. But if you never set up the bonds, that's going to be, really hard on you. I want you to encourage, as number 7, encourage downtime. I want you to set up that you're going to work with your kids to deal with boredom. When they say, I'm bored, don't, we want to say, like, well, you have all those games and blah, blah, blah. We want to give them ideas. It's like, I would give them empathy. Like, wow, must be hard to be bored. Good luck with that. I wonder what you could do. Do you need any ideas? I teach love and logic parenting, and they have this great problem solving technique where you give them empathy for a problem like that, and then you ask them what they're going to do about it. Because when they make a statement like that, our natural parenting aura is that we think it's our problem to help them solve. It's not. It's their problem that they're bored and they get to solve it. So we give them say, "Oh, that's so sad that you're bored. What are you going to do about that?" And then you ask a question, say, "Would you like some ideas?" This is something parents, it is not natural to ask your kid for permission to give ideas, but it works so well because it tests out whether your kid's brain is open or closed. Because if your kid says, "No, you're always giving me stupid ideas," not that any of you would have a kid that would say that, but but the kid will say, "What?" Or they're like, "I don't know," or something like that. It just like this little test, like, "Would you like some ideas?" And they might say no, and it's like, "Oh, good luck with that." Otherwise, if they say, "What?" Say, "Well, I remember grandma gave you a coloring set. What do you think of that?" Some kids might color. Some kids might um, do a popsicle stick house. How would that work? And you just give them a couple of ideas. You do not have to solve the problem, just a couple ideas and say, "Oh, I'm so happy that you are smart enough. I bet you'll figure this out." But that's what I want to talk about in this idea of encouraging downtime. It's a skill to be able to deal with boredom, and you can give little once you've tested their brain to see if it's open, could be reading, art, whatever, you might say like, well, some kids might decide to use some of their spending money to go buy some things so that when they're bored, they have something to do. I have some Pinterest idea boards. It's under Parenting Decoded, and there's indoor activities, activities for kids, board games, stuff like that, family night ideas. Go to my Pinterest boards and see. I culled a bunch of stuff that could be useful to you if you're struggling as a parent. Lots of interesting things over there. Next thing, step number 8, I want you to model it. I need you as parents to model good digital habits. And those digital habits are things like I put my phone down when I'm having dinner with my family. I have conversations in the car instead of being on my phone while I'm in the car talking to, you can do phone calls or whatever. Um, you want to include downtime in that. You want to show that you have downtime from your devices so that your kids know that you can struggle with it too. I mean, it's really easy for us to get on our devices, isn't it? And I want you to talk about how it's hard for you to get off your devices because it shows that you're human. And our kids need to know that our parents aren't perfect, that we as parents aren't perfect. And you need to model that for them. Say, like, gosh, it's really hard for me. I get bored too. What should I do? And maybe you sort of make a game like, hey, why don't you give me some ideas about what I should do when I'm bored? Anyway, we're usually not bored, are we? We have lists of things to do. They're going to follow our lead if they see what we're doing and they know that we struggle and we come up with ideas. Okay, ready for the next phase? This is where you get into individual cell phone and laptop use. We want to move into a, all the previous guidelines apply from 1 through 8, but we're also going to be dealing with when they get their individual cell phones and laptops, they start thinking they own it and privacy, like you can't see that, mom, dad. And we already talked a little bit about this where homework time kind of just keeps expanding, doesn't it? And we're going to talk about that. The first thing that you need to do, and all elementary school parents for sure can do this. Some middle school parents can get here, and it's really hard to do it for high school parents because high schoolers are already have too many patterns set up, but you can try. And that's to use a contract, a digital contract. I want you to use them, and I want you to use those digital contracts so that it's really obvious when they can use their devices. And you want to do it as soon as anything appears in their lives, and you want to do it so that the rules are apparent. So as you are about to give your child a cell phone, give them a cell phone contract that they agree to before you go out and buy that cell phone. Don't be nice mommy or daddy and say like, "Oh, I'm such a nice mom. At 13, I'm going to give you a cell phone." And you've been telling them that since they were 9 because they've been bugging you since they were 9. "Mom, everybody else has a cell phone. I don't have a cell phone." They're whining for years and you finally say, "Okay, you're 13, you get it," or it's 12 or whatever age limit that you decided that your child would get that cell phone. Well, I would say I give cell phones to 12-year-olds who are willing to sign a a digital contract, and my trusty assistant, Amy, is gonna put a link to a digital contract that I have that some of my parents it's a dad who is at Google, set this up for his middle and high school, kids, and, it just really helps define things. You wanna know that it's a document that evolves. You wanna be able to do things like, um, state policies for every different kind of device, whether it's a television, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a cell phone. You want to be able to define things like where do they get charged and where's the location for the charging? What time of day are they allowed to use the devices? What kind of apps they're allowed to have on the devices? You want to be able to have passwords as for us parents so that we could log on to the if you're going to let your kid use TikTok, I want you to be able to have the password for TikTok so that you can go look at your kid's TikTok. There's also the idea that you are friends with your kids on Snapchat or whatever, but there's ways that they can dodge around you on that kind of stuff. Um, you want to be able to define consequences for when rules aren't followed. If they don't turn in their phone to charge on the counter, what happens? If you find a child with a device at 2 in the morning, what happens? You want to involve them in what those consequences are. Just like we had talked about before, when they're younger, you want them to I put up some ideas with what the consequences are if they have too much TV time or don't get off. Same thing here, they're a little bit older and their devices are more complicated and you want to keep going. You want to have regular family meetings about this document. And I would say every year the document would be reviewed. And as your child gets older and older, um, and trust is built in over time that you can trust that your child knows where to charge the devices, that you can trust that your child is mentally capable of handling social media and things like that, then then I would be revising the document. But I want you to hold regular family meetings to talk about electronic contracts. It's like, is that reasonable? Is it reasonable that you have it, that you can use it in your room? Like, no, our family rule is no electronics in bedrooms, no electronics charging in bedrooms, and stuff like that. Um, so I want you to be communicating. I want you to use monitoring software, which is different than parental controls. Some of you are going to feel that you need to use monitoring software, and this is where Bark comes in. You can monitor, detect, alert is their like slogan, and you can do it app by app. The thing is that it will review what's going on in an app and it will detect if things are not right. It doesn't stop anything. It's more like a monitoring thing instead of something that stops it. Like internet filters you can set up so that you can't get to certain things. This is going to like if they have TikTok on their phone, they're going to go on TikTok and they're going to be able to use TikTok. And you, as a family unit, have set up with your parameters about what they can do on TikTok and set. But and they use artificial intelligence to find words that are bullying, words that are uh, have to do with porn, have to do with things that are not good. And you put bark on each app that your child has. So if they have Snapchat, you would put it on that. If they had Instagram, you would put it on that. If they had TikTok, you would put it on that. And your child has to willingly agree to let you put it on it. And so if you give a fourth grader a cell phone and you say, you're only going to get this phone if you're agreeing to put bark on every app that's there. then they're at 4th grade, they're gonna go, "Sure, sure, sure." But if you've never done that and you have a sophomore in high school and say, "Hey, I just came to Mary Eshin's, seminar and I wanna put bark on your phone," and they're gonna barf on your idea of putting bark on it. Um, unless you have some amazing relationship. But it's for to protect our kids so that there is somebody else monitoring our kids besides us because it's hard to monitor them. There's lots of traffic that happens on those phones and devices. I want you to talk about online safety with your kids. um, One of the most effective things that you can do is to have conversations with your kids about online safety. You want to talk about things like privacy versus protection and safety. You want to have those topics, they're dinner table topics. And you want to say, like, whoa, I noticed this news article, or, they just had that cybersecurity breach with the pipelines last week, and I would bring that up. It's like, wow, that's a cybersecurity. What do you think about somebody hacking into your phone or scams and stuff like that? Talk about how it is that people get bullied or whatever. But you want to have open-ended questions and not lectures instead of saying like, oh, online's bad, it's bad for your brain, if you stay up too late on electronics, you're not going to be able to sleep well, it interferes with your brain and all that kind of stuff. It's like they don't want to hear a lecture. they want to hear they want to have a discussion. They should want to have a discussion. But if you've ever been around somebody who lectures all the time, maybe it was your parents, like, they don't want to listen to you. But if you're having a discussion, like you have with your friends, your best friend or whatever, you have a talk, you chat, and you don't say like, I think you should do this, I think you should do that, this is the right way or the wrong way or whatever. It's like, just say like, what do you think about porn? What do you think about, those kids who get cyberbullied? What do you think about predators online? And they'll say, "Oh, mom, that's so stupid." And it's like, your kids are going to be on online gaming, and they're going to have people on chats that are saying stuff, and they're going to be swearing all the time on online games as they get into middle and high school. They will. It's part of the culture of gaming, and it's like, have a conversation about that. Is it appropriate? Is it not appropriate? Is it appropriate to at least remember that mom and dad are around and I don't want to hear that? Um, but all of this stuff, if you set up so many rules about digital behavior and everything, where especially where they don't have a say in what is happening to them, they're going to rebel. They're going to find ways to get around the family rules and stuff like that. So the more you include them in the discussions, the more that you include them in setting up your rules for digital contracts and stuff like that, the more compliance that you'll have. And you understanding that they do have needs and things like that that you might not fully understand, and having and saying that, like, could you explain it to me? Ask them for information. I want you to talk to your kids about social media. It is big. It is really big. And there are things that happen on social media that we as parents are just clueless about. It changes really fast. When I started giving this talk a few, probably 4 or 5 years, TikTok didn't even exist. And now it's like the biggest thing since sliced bread. It's like crazy. And so you need to be aware that if you have a kindergartner now, there's going to be stuff that I'm not talking about right now because it doesn't exist yet. And you just need to be keeping up on stuff because you don't want it to pass you by. I want to tell you a story about Snapchat and Instagram. They have counters in them, and those counters can cause social behavior that we just don't even get. It's like, if on Snapchat they came up with this feature about 3 or 4 years ago, it's called a streak. And on Snapchat's the app that you take a picture and it goes away supposedly after somebody looks at it. Well, it's not quite true because someone can take a screenshot of any picture that is on Snapchat. Um, but the idea is that if I have a friend, my friend Amy, she's my co-host, if I send her a Snapchat and she sends one back to me, that's a streak of one. Tomorrow, I send her one, she sends me one, that's a streak of two. And this goes on. There's I'm going to say girls, it's most likely girls. They have streaks going on with lots of different friends. Well, if I get mad at Amy and we have a streak of like 273 days, and Amy does something that I don't like maybe she wore the wrong color shirt to middle school, I'm going to end my streak with her. And that's a form of cyberbullying that we parents don't even see. And all these little counter kind of things that are going on in the background, they're real and they can be used to hurt people. And that's why you need to keep up on things that as you let your kids get onto apps, it's like it can be really hurtful and it changes really fast. And so, the other thing that happens is that kids they set up extra accounts. There's Instagram. I watched a lecture of a sheriff who was in the like cyber team of the Santa Clara County sheriffs or something like that. Her own teenagers had like 3 different levels of Instagram accounts. Her son had one that mom could see, the sheriff, and then she wound up finding out that he had 2 other levels. So just beware. And you can have behavioral changes. Just keep an eye on them. For girls, they bond with chatting, and that's why social media sites they are super popular. They can connect, and it can be really fun, but they can also be really hurtful. And girls are twice as likely to be bullied as boys. And all that thing I said earlier about there's being no empathy on these flat screen devices, it's so easy for a kid to say something really mean to someone that they would never say in person. And you want to be able to educate and have discussions with your kid about like, how would it feel if somebody told you you were a dirt bag or something like that, or you were stupid, or I didn't like your color shirt that day, or everybody ignored you and stuff like that. It can be really mean. Um, middle school, from middle school on, there's lots of pressure for girls to do sexting, and that's where they send pictures of their boob or their whatever private parts, or they're in skimpy attires, like, oh, put on your bathing suit and send it to me, sweetie. Um, and lots of pressure to do that, and you need to talk to your girls about not doing that and why it might not be good to do that. For boys, they socialize by playing together. Your boys are going to want to say, "I got to play with my friends. Everybody's on Minecraft, everybody is or on Fortnite or whatever." So you do need to recognize that that's a way that boys socialize, just like you need to recognize the social media apps for girls are big. And boys want to do something together. And so gaming is huge and it doesn't have to be all that bad, but you need to be on top of it. You need to know why your boy is playing a certain game and what they like about it. Talk to them about the different characters in the game and stuff like that. Um, you wanna you wanna even play with them sometimes. As part of my parenting journey, I have 2 sons, and I said they're in their 20s, and my younger son, who's now out of college, he wanted to be a professional gamer. And some of you are gonna get hit with that, "I wanna be a professional gamer" life like I did. And, I had to sort of embrace it and not fight with him about it all the time. Yes, he was on the computer a lot, but I made sure that we agreed that he was a basketball player. He was earned good grades. He had a good balance, and he would look online himself to make sure that he's ergonomically set up. He bought himself a really expensive gaming chair with his own money. He had a part-time job. So make sure that your kids are balanced in different areas of their lives, that their whole life doesn't revolve around this. But my son still had time to become a semi-pro player by the time he got to college. And he chose a game that I would not have wanted, but I got to see because I took the time as a parent to learn what he liked about the game. I learned that he learned all about playing with other players, being able to set up schedules and practice times and all sorts of management things that um, most parents would just complain about their kid being on the computer. It's like he learned so much about life by being involved in that computer in that particular way. It wasn't a one-on-one thing. It was 5 versus 5 players. He needed to recruit people. He did have people from throughout the country. He it was a big journey, and I'm glad that he chose not to, and that he graduated from college, and that he has a really good computer job. But I've been there, and I know how much it meant to my son that I took the time to talk to him, not to lecture him, to try to understand, to try to make sure that he was healthy. But it took a lot for me to do that, to not just be mad that he was on the computer all the time. So I want to let you know that boys are going to be on social media. Last thing, I want you to talk about porn. It's a huge problem in our society. And It's accidental at first. It can happen in early middle school. It's by middle school, it starts being intentional. And the thing that's really important for us as parents to be aware is that our kids' brains, when they hit puberty, the way brain development works is that their brain sloughs off about half its neuroconnectors to make room for future connections in puberty and adulthood. And as a consequence, their brain's pretty empty in terms of what could be put in there. And if they're watching porn, their neuro networks are being wired to think that that kind of sex that they see in those porn videos is quote unquote normal. And it impacts their long-term sexual performance. And I know this is a really awkward conversation to have, even for me to be talking to you about it. But the thing is that if our kids are being raised to think that porn is normal sexual behavior, well, isn't it a non-relational, love doesn't come into it, respect doesn't come into it, and the thing is already happening in our society. The highest incidence of male impotence and right now being reported is from for men between the ages of 20 and 30. That is not something that should be happening at all. That is something that should be reserved for much older men, but it has to do with porn and how easy it is to access. And I want you to talk to your kids about it. There is a book that Amy's going to put in the chat box. It's for young kids, and you need to talk to kids appropriate, age appropriate for sure. But I would start talking to them about it in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, middle school, stuff like that. Sexting, I would talk to my kids about it. Um, and it's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's they have a couple of different versions. They even have ones for meant for younger kids. I want you to think about that, and I want you to talk to your kids about it because I don't want them to become addicted to porn or their brains to be wired in ways that you don't want them to. Um, a couple of final comments about brains, all those texting and electronic beeps. It's like a dopamine, and dopamine is the things in drugs that make our brains happy. And so when a kid hears a bleep, it's like heroin for the brain, and their brains are forming. So you need to make sure that you're monitoring that. They're monitoring, talking to them, but their thinking brain, their real brain is going to be what protects them, what keeps your kids safe. So you having conversations with them and having a relationship with them, talking about these things, not lecturing, is what's going to keep them safest. You want to plan for failure. They are going to make mistakes. And that's okay because you want them to make mistakes when they're in your home. I want to mention a couple of things about screen time addiction. Sometimes people have kids that they're worried about. If they can't control their screen use, they lose interest in other activities. If everything they do is preoccupied by that, where they don't want to socialize anymore, um, you know, it if you see these kind of things where they go off at a handle a bit, if you try to take away their electronics and stuff like that, you might want to seek professional help in order to do that. Some parents do a 3-week fast where they take away electronics for 3 weeks. Maybe that's going to be you. I want you to also, I said that you need to keep you need to keep up on all this. I happen to subscribe. There's a couple of websites out there that I like. One is called stayhip.com, and they send updates, a newsletter that helps people with like me learn about the current memes, and just like once a week or so they send out things of what's happening on TikTok and stuff like that, just really brief, what new memes are going and stuff like that. I think that you should check it out. I like commonsensemedia.org. I think they have really good reviews of apps and games and stuff like that. They are pretty on top of electronics. Axis has lots of guides for technology and teen, you know, connecting with your teens and stuff like that. It is Christian based, but they have some really good stuff. Protectyoungminds.org. It helps protect kids from porn. um, American Pediatrics. This is just a chart that says, you know, 18 under 18 months old, only video chatting, and under 2 years old, a little bit of electronics or TV with parents. But by the time they get to 6 plus, which is my recommendation, is consistent limits. You just need to have consistent limits and stick to them. That's it. We made it. If you need help, I do have my podcast called Parenting Decoded. I want to encourage you to go there to look for things. I do have a podcast that covers all these same topics. It's podcast 11 and 12 on the screen that you see. But I talk about family meetings or anger management. I talk about all sorts of stuff. I have over 30 podcasts now. And think of it as a library if you have an issue, whether it's food battles with your kids or screen time, or you need to set up consequences, or maybe you have sibling battles. um, all sorts of resources are available on my podcast, but I also have some YouTube videos that are these hour-long seminars. I mentioned the one about getting kids to listen has been added now. Solving tantrums, anger management for parents, it's really popular. And this is going to be put up on YouTube as well. Other resources for you, you can email me. I am so happy to help any parent who has any question. Don't feel like you're all alone in the world. Please just send me an email, ask me a question. I'd love that. I have a website that you can go to. It has a bunch of different resources. I have a Facebook group called Parenting Decoded 2021 that you can have discussions, and I post things kind of special for people when I have certain questions I want to ask people or have discussions. I have Instagram, there's a newsletter. Um, I will teach a Love and Logic class. It's a 6-week class, 2 hours a week. I will do that sometime when the pandemic lets me. You can also hire me as a parenting coach. I have really reasonable rates. It's only $50 an hour. Therapists and stuff like that charge, $100, $200 an hour, or whatever. If you need some help, I'm here. And I do them over Zoom so that you don't have to get childcare and stuff like that. If you need that, you let me know. And that's it. I'm open to questions.